Hello out there. Welcome back to your favorite Veritas branded LinkedIn talk show, the #1 highest rated talk show as rated by my parents. Yes, I'm talking, of course, about Veritas Live. So happy you're here. I'm your host. I'm your guide. I'm your conversational Sherpa this morning, and I'm excited to get into it. As always, I am broadcasting to you from my remote home office in Central Florida, where we are still reeling from a storm that hit us last week. If you're in my neck of the woods, hurricane went and came by and just gave us a nice high five or slap in the face, depending on where you are. Solidarity. If you were on the coast or affected by this storm, well wishes to you. Do not forget to reach out to somebody. Let's lean on each other if we need some relief here. But enough about Florida. I want to know about you. Where are you tuning in from? Where in the world are you? Where do you reside? Your home, your house, your abode, your dwelling, your casa, your crib, your pad, wherever it is you are. We want to know about it. My favorite part about having a live environment like this is we get to engage with one another. So I've got my comment box open. I'm trying to multitask. I'm reading. I want to give you a shout out and I want to engage with you this morning. So send some love in the comments. Send a poem, a haiku, a quip, a quarrel, whatever it may be. Go ahead. I'll wait. I'll wait for some interaction here. And while you're doing that, if you'd like to use the hashtag Veritas Live, you will earn yourself an additional brownie point or 5. And those brownie points are great because they can be redeemed for pencils and pens and highlighters. And if you earn up enough brownie points, even a pizza party for your team. So do that. Engage with us. Veritas hashtag live. Veritas Live hashtag. Thank you. But today we've got a great episode. It's October, which means Halloween is right around the corner. That's right. Spooky season is among us, but what's even spookier than ghosts, goblins, and ghouls is cyber threats. So October also marks the beginning of Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and we've been doing episodes all around cloud this season. But in conjunction with Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we are going to talk about all things EDRM. That's the Electronic Discovery Reference Model. Ooh, we've got some let's see, Connecticut, New York, Norway. All right, we've got someone all the way from Norway. How about that? So I want to know about EDRM as it relates to the cloud. What are we doing to keep things secure? Privacy, how are we discovering against information in this new multi-cloud environment, this hybrid cloud world that we're all entering into? So EDRM, when we talk about EDRM, we think about really global standards or practices to make sure that we can improve upon e-discovery, privacy, security, information governance. It's those test cases, those data sets, those best practices. It's adopted in 136 countries, spanning across 6 different continents. It's incredibly important. It has such an innovative support network for everybody who's adopted this, for the organizations, the individuals, governments, whatever it may be, where we're all learning and growing together. It's hugely important. I want to know how it's affected. I want to know really the importance of it, how organizations can adopt it, what tools they need. I've got so many questions. In order to answer these questions, I'm going to need some insanely expert guests, and I've got them today. Please welcome to the program. I've got Greg Buckles from EDJ Group Incorporated. Buckle in for Greg. Greg, thanks so much. And I've got Irfan Shuttari. He is Veritas's own director of eDiscovery and Veritas lawyer. Is that correct, Irfan?
Yeah. I'm excited to be here, talk to you about all things EDRM. Highlight of my legal career being on Veritas Live.
I love it. Greg, welcome to the program.
Thanks a bunch, Johnny. Welcome. Glad to be here.
And I know you've both watched every episode, and I really appreciate that. You've studied the program. You know how this goes. So before we jump into it, we always like to dip our toes into the conversational waters. We do this through a little icebreaker. So I'm going to ask you both. Here it is. Drum roll, please. What was your favorite? What's the most favorite Halloween costume that you've had over the years? What got you the most compliments? What got you the most candy? What did you like? And while you're thinking about that, same question goes out to the audience there. Full transparency. I have no plan this Halloween, so I want to see what worked well, what I could steal, especially if it's an easy costume. I love it. And a shout out there to Saudi Arabia, Dublin. We've got somebody in Houston, Turkey, India. I love it. Keep the comments coming. But I'll pass it to you guys, Irfan, Greg, whoever wants to go first. Halloween costume, let's hear it.
I was lucky one year to get invited to the old days, an Oingo Boingo Dead Man's party. And a buddy of mine's a teaching doc. So he loaned me one of their teaching skeletons, and I built a 7-foot, essentially Grim Reaper, with the whole, the head was about 2 foot above me, and it was a lot of fun.
Oh my gosh, a full-on Grim Reaper. I think that beats my Rambo costume where I just had a red scarf on my head. So yeah, you win that. Irfan, should you have gone first? Did he
No, that's a good one. And I got to say, I haven't been super creative with costumes for Halloween. I went as Terrible Terry Tate, the linebacker in the commercials from Super Bowl a couple years ago, and that went well. But I got to be honest with you, Johnny, I'm looking forward to this year's costume. I'm dressing up as Johnny King from Veritas Live.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait. You're going to have to do the sunken eyes. You're going to have to shave your face. It's going to be great. Yeah. It's going to be great. Oh, that's hilarious. I'll probably go as the same thing. It's great having a talk show like this because I finally got recognized for the first time.
Absolutely.
It was my wife who recognized me, but it still felt equally as great. Oh, I got this. When will Aaron Judge hit number 62? All right, we've got some conversations about Aaron Judge. Did you see that guy who tried to catch the 61st ball? He dropped it. Oh, so much money you just lost.
You can't miss these big moments in your life.
Oh, it's tough. It's tough. All right, let's jump into it. Moving right along. Greg, first question I got for you is really what is EDRM in layman's terms, and what makes it so important?
Got it. Back in the late 90s, when email first hit and started showing up in discovery requests, which is what we call anytime somebody asks a company, the lawyers get asked, hey, give me everything about this contract, this person. In that time period, we were suddenly seeing email and native files showing up. They were getting printed, but there wasn't a model and there wasn't a way to talk back and forth between consumers, vendors, technologists. And so the electronic discovery reference model was built really to give a vocabulary to the market. So the market could understand this life cycle of information governance, where the data is generated, what the lawyers have to do to preserve it, collect it, review it, and then finally how it gets used as evidence in court. So that whole model, really, it's a definition of process for us. And it was aspirational in the beginning in the 90s, and for some people it still is. For others, they've invested heavily in it and their technology, and so now it's more of a service model and less of a fire drill every time they get the subpoena that rolls in.
Yeah, and Johnny, just to add on to what Greg mentioned, I think it's important to understand that we're having kind of a chicken and egg conversation here. Is that what came first? High-end stakes litigation that we're requesting large amounts of data within discovery, or the advent of email? And they kind of coincide with one another. You had electronic data kind of taking off within corporate spaces, but we're talking about lawsuits here, big lawsuits that were taking place. Buzzwords from the 90s are Enron and those types of lawsuits. And so you had these high stakes litigation with electronic data and corporations wondering, okay, we see what Enron's going through and the mess that's about to be created there. How do we satisfy those requirements that courts are asking Enron to follow? That's where the EDRM gets invented. They had different phases for corporations to be able to model and follow so that they will be in conjunction with what courts may ask for them as a part of a litigation proceeding.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, Enron, haven't heard that in a little while. Where I know, Greg, you mentioned it a little earlier when we were talking off camera about your work there. Well, they'll take your money and run. You know what? I'll see myself out. It's a live show. Not every joke works, but look, you gotta swing every now and then. Aaron Judge, number 62, hashtag. So Irfan, then, how are companies now mapping and capturing data across this new kind of multi-cloud world that we're living in now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think that as organizations start moving into a multi-cloud environment, they're thinking about different configurations and aspects of their environment. But perhaps the one consideration they aren't thinking about is discovery. And so We're very lucky that with the EDRM, which EDRM.net, we should give a shout out to the EDRM folks. They've done a great job of always adapting that workflow as technology has changed it. Even in that multi-cloud environment, the first stage of the EDRM, which is called information governance, didn't exist in its original outset when EDRM first created their workflow. But what information governance does for corporations is prior to any incident taking place, prior to any triggering action taking place, you're keeping a holistic initiative around preserving data for litigation purposes. And that's going to span both a multi-cloud environment as well as a hybrid environment, which we know a lot of our organizations are in today.
And when you say, Johnny, it's like, how are people tracking it these days?
Mm-hmm.
I did a session with a corporate client yesterday where we walk through their quote unquote data map. And part of what they have to do in a multi-cloud environment, in the new environment, is they actually leverage their purchasing department and they flag on people's corporate credit cards when they're paying subscriptions to cloud services so that they can go back and say, no, wait a minute. What are you using this for and what are you using that for? And legal has to get involved, because if they're using it for business and they end up in an incident, a lawsuit, something else where that data is important, legal has to go get it. So that's part of why the multi-cloud suddenly makes a huge change. In the last 2 to 3 years, it's skyrocketed. Every department out there, somebody's using a new service to track tasks or do something else that ends up becoming relevant to us later.
Yeah, and I imagine it's only getting more and more relevant, or it's only becoming more and more of a problem as we advance. So, I guess along those same lines, how specifically or how else does EDRM increase privacy protection, security, and what are some of those other benefits organizations will see if they apply to those standards?
I would actually take you back a little bit in time, and this is the fun part, is we started a lot of these technology initiatives because the consequences of not being able to preserve in an archive, collect with an appliance were so large. But legal technology was kind of the cutting edge. And what we're now seeing is that same technology is being applied into security, it's being applied into privacy, all those classification systems and everything else. Well, when you had a multi-million-dollar or multi-billion-dollar lawsuit and you had to go through reams and reams of files, that's where a lot of that was developed. So in one sense, the electronic discovery world is kind of driven the advancement of AI into data.
Interesting. Irfan, anything to add there?
No, I mean, I think it's as it relates to security, there's a double-edged sword with the cloud. Although you've now moved your infrastructure off of your own organization's IT infrastructure, you do worry about resiliency. You do worry about backing up your data, and these are all principles that are ingrained within the information governance reference model, which is that first stage of the EDRM. We can always go downstream on the EDRM, talking about the collecting of data in different source locations. But going upstream is kind of the story now, as the whole infrastructure of an organization's IT has changed. And so security it's a double-edged sword in the sense that you've now placed data all over the place and you're worried about resiliency, but clouds are always monitored. And so you do have this 24/7 monitoring that's going on, not only from our Veritas cloud solutions, but as well as other cloud solutions in that Azure and AWS space. So as it relates to security, the EDRM provides a model to have a more secure, resilient, robust IT environment, while at the same time eventually being able to explore and collect that data as it relates to an eDiscovery request.
Which seems incredibly beneficial. Now, you mentioned some solutions, some product sets too. So I want to know, being who you are, the director of eDiscovery strategy here, what is Veritas doing for advanced eDiscovery, and how does that play against some of the other competitors in the space or in the market?
Yeah, I'm glad I get the time to talk about this, and don't turn off LinkedIn Live yet. Johnny King's got some good comments at the end as well. But you're right, Veritas is in this eDiscovery space, and we have been for quite a while. As it relates to the EDRM, all vendors want to be able to map their tool to every phase of the EDRM. But we have too many point solutions in that eDiscovery market today. And that's not to say they're bad products. They're just point solutions. They can't map to every phase of the EDRM. They can only go to singular phases. Where we feel we differentiate ourselves is part of our legacy. We can map to that entire EDRM lifecycle. That goes back to our legacy of the eDiscovery startup that we acquired, that I was a part of when I got acquired by Veritas, and Greg was a part of on the Symantec side when they acquired the product, which was Clearwell. That was an end-to-end eDiscovery tool. Now, it was an on-premise solution. It was an application that was deployed heavily in that federal government space, as well as public sector state spaces, and then internationally. But Veritas continues to build upon that legacy of being an end-to-end EDRM solution with Veritas Advanced eDiscovery, as you mentioned, Johnny. It is a cloud-based end-to-end solution with a unique perspective of going upstream on the EDRM. Not only do we have your information governance policies and initiatives intact with our archiving solutions, Enterprise Vault, enterprisevalt.cloud, as well as our data ownership and data detection with Data Insight. But then we have our discovery solution and the ability to be able to collect from all those different sources. We can go both at source and collect the data, as well as take the data that you've already preserved as a part of your information and governance initiatives in your archive. That's one of the big value adds with Veritas Advanced eDiscovery. We go upstream on the EDRM, allowing you to be able to both monitor, capture, and collect that data, and then go further downstream to the more bread and butter of eDiscovery, the analysis and review, and that export or a defensible production to that opposing party or regulatory counsel. So huge value proposition, being able to map to every phase of that EDRM solution, and VAD, as we like to call it internally, the Veritas Advanced eDiscovery solution gives you that.
VAD, I like it. It's a wonderful acronym. Rolls off the tongue. Greg, yeah. What did we miss?
The only thing I would add in there, and this is kind of the point solution issue, comes back to bite folks, because the friction between moving data between different platforms is underestimated, and it slows things down. So when you have systems that are integrated all the way upstream into the Microsoft 365 environment, into your various cloud repositories that Microsoft doesn't control, and you can bring it all into one platform or see it in place, so that you can carry out that early investigation, that early assessment on, what's there, who said what files are still running around. That's pretty critical. What I see for corporations that have kind of put together a patchwork is they're constantly having to move data. They've got to pull it out of one system, put it into the next system. They're assessing it with one system, they're reviewing it on another. They still have to move it out of all those in order to get it processed. That's where it comes back to bite them. And it's not just the friction, but it's also the risk. Every time you transition data, there's a risk that it's going to get transformed. You're going to drop metadata, things are going to happen, it comes back on folks. It really is about going back to the earliest days when the first archives, the first ever enterprise-wide discovery-based search was the KVS platform, which has become Enterprise Vault. Mm-hmm. And I used it during the Enron process to actually stay out of jail, because I was on the hot seat for the AG to produce data out, and we used that platform to be able to pull the information that was provided for as one of the three players in the Enron stuff. So you've got that legacy that goes all the way back to the late 90s, early 2000s. And that's what you really want to be able to count on when you're in the hot seat.
Yeah, and I think, one thing to add on, Johnny, and I would love to hear Greg's thoughts on this as well. I think as eDiscovery has evolved, as this EDRM has evolved, we went from what he's talking about, where the best corporations were the ones who were archiving their data and keeping it in a succinct place. A lot of those organizations now are trying to shift into this Microsoft 365 environment. And that's fine, but it may not live up to the standards that they've become accustomed to capturing to, for example, a worm-based storage location, or something that is compliant with their discovery needs that they've already kind of shown over the past few years. But Greg, to your point, and I'd be curious about how you feel. I think that with EDRM being the way it is, it's going to start looking more at discovery at source, because everyone is keeping their data inside of Microsoft 365, and we get it. As awesome as it is to be able to collect data from all these different content sources and all these multi-cloud environments, can I just actually go and do discovery at the source location, kind of rummage through my laundry and just pull the things I need and move that data and not have to pull, as you said, moving data from one place to another. It's just pulling that one piece of data or this, few pieces of data that I would need for specific investigation.
Well, Irfan, it's a numbers game. The corporations are very smart. I do ROI reviews on large global corporations all the time. In the end, roughly about 3% of the data that we preserve in place actually ends up to be relevant to a given discovery request that comes in. And if you pull all the data for the 10 or 15 custodians that you've named in that case, it's a huge chunk of data, and you've got to move it and you got to process it and you got to do all that stuff. If it's in place and you can find it, search it, and you pull the very richest part of it, you're still going to get more than what that 3%. You're still going to get, 10%, 12%, 15%. But the return on investment for the corporations is immediate. All of a sudden, they're not moving the data. All of a sudden, attorneys that they're paying $500+ an hour are no longer looking at non-relevant data. But that requires that rich upstream information governance. It requires classification to add what kind of documents are these, where do they belong, where in your business process do they come from, so that you can really get the good stuff. And you're no longer pulling everybody's, private information. You need to be able to winnow out all the private stuff, and you need to be able to pull in what's relevant to what they asked for at this point.
Yeah, be a little bit more targeted. And I like that, rummaging through your dirty laundry, doing 50 loads of laundry. And if it's 3% you're targeting, you're really only getting one sock there, right?
Don't laugh. My old team I made T-shirts for my old team. It said, "We read your email." Because back in the old day, we did. Yes.
My Teams chat as well, asking for a friend.
Teams is tough. Teams is Veritas has been able to do it. Some of the platforms have been able to bring it over. It's not just about getting the chat, though. It's about rendering it back into the context that makes sense that it was sent in. Because right now, Microsoft, they've gotten a little bit better. They're no longer giving you back 50,000 little one-liners. Instead, they're giving it to you now in one-day chunks. But a day chunk, when you start a conversation with 3 people in the morning that is important, and then you spend the whole rest of your afternoon chatting with somebody you're flirting with 3 departments over, you don't want that part. We don't want that part. Please.
We don't.
I like it.
So it's Teams. Teams is there, but honestly, Microsoft is lagging on it because they're working so hard to make it available and to bring all the new features to people to do the business process. That eDiscovery for them is, they have good partners like Veritas. They trust that their advanced customers will be using a partner product to do the eDiscovery part of it, because their eDiscovery features will be there eventually. Just don't try to ask them for things like recordings and transcripts and stuff like that.
Sure. And yeah, it's getting hard to find a customer that's not on Office 365. And but when we're talking about eDiscovery and really supervision classification, what we're going to need, it seems like they might need a more robust approach.
Absolutely. It's all about their litigation profile. Do they get sued once every decade, or is it literally, are they getting 10 discovery requests in or demands a day?
Yeah. And I think most vendors will tell you that anyone who's become accustomed to some of these advanced eDiscovery solutions in the market space has a difficult time shifting over to a single glass view from Microsoft. They need a more advanced solution. And like you said, it's going to depend on their litigation. And I think with Teams specifically, we need a proper view for Teams data. We need a proper understanding of collaboration data at the judicial level, at the court level. So you'll start seeing eDiscovery vendors kind of follow suit. We were lucky enough that we were developing our product during the time of COVID. And so we thought about, how are people communicating in the workplace? But then more than that, how will they be reviewing this data? And shout out to my attorneys, my legal folks. We were looking out for them when we built our collaboration view. We wanted to make sure that it wasn't understood as an email, that it was understood as Teams data. And so we provide efficiency by being able to collect that source. We provide transparency with our classification policies. But, to the lawyers that are out there watching, yes, we did get rid of some of your billable hours. And so you're going to have to work elsewhere.
Well said. Well, hey, as a participant in 2 or 3 law school parties, I feel like I got one of those shout outs. I take that to heart. But hey, Irfan, I had some fun with you today.
Hey, it was awesome.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that either. Greg, thank you so much. Thank you both for joining us. I really appreciate it. And jumping on so early. But anyway, hey, if you're out there, thanks so much for engaging with us today. Thank you so much for the comments. Stay tuned for more. Veritas is bringing you an insanely awesome event, the Conquer Every Cloud. It's an hour-long virtual event, October 19th, hosted by none other than Dr. Ken Jeong. You know him from The Hangover. You know him from The Masked Singer. He is equal parts insightful and hilarious, so you're not going to want to miss that. And hey, if you're there at 8 a.m., join us, Veritas Live, for something a little earlier, right before the kickoff. You're not going to want to miss it, so stay tuned. We're going to have some fun for that as well. So again, thank you, everybody out there. Thank you, Greg and Irfan. I appreciate it. Love the conversation. And we'll see you back here soon for the next episode. See ya.
Bye, everybody.